Well, hello there, and welcome back to the Smart Money, Dumb Money Show. And I'm your host, Keith Richards, and I'm the President and Chief Portfolio Manager of Value Trend Wealth Management. And today, I'm going to give you a little bit of a treat on this video. I always try to do the videos with material that lies outside of our newsletter and our blogs. So this is kind of a treat because we're going to introduce a concept that I have recently written about in my new book on contrarian investing. The book is called Smart Money, Dumb Money, Beating the Crowd Through Contrarian Investing. And my second final chapter in the book is called Non-Traditional Contrarian Investment Tools. And in it, I explore a number of investment tools that in many cases are being used by the most sophisticated traders in the world. And what's interesting about these tools is that while some of them, true, you would have to pay some of the services to get the data feeds. And in fact, we at Value Trend have begun actually paying for some of these data feeds ourselves. But some of these tools, and I list a number of them, are completely free and available to you, the retail investor. So I think you'll find today's lesson, if you want to call it that, very interesting because it's a tool that you and I can access for no money down, and it's actually not a bad tool to spot super overblown situations. Now, it's not such a tool to find situations that are undervalued or ready to buy. But you might want to, let's pretend that you had a position in a high-flying stock or a high-flying sector. You might want to access this tool that I'm going to introduce today, which is, again, only one of the tools I'm talking about in my new book, which will be released in July. You may want to access this tool if you own a stock that has done very, very well and seems to be getting an awful lot of good press and attention, and it just seems to be getting a little bit rich. You can look at this tool and get a pretty good indication that the stock or sector that you are invested in is high probability going to have some downside ahead of it. So I chose 4 examples, but I'll show you how to use the tool, and it's with no further ado, the tool is called the Google Trends tool. Now, this is a tool that you can use for many different things, but us as stock investors, we can use it to find out if people have become too enamored with the stock. So I want to use 4 examples here, and I'm going to start with my favorite whipping boy. Anybody that reads my blog knows that I called Tesla's top. And again, it was another decent call. And one of the tools I used, not the only tool, but one of the tools I used was a confirmation of the Google search trends pattern on Tesla just before it peaked. So let's take a look at the stock. So I'm going to go to share screen. And first thing we're going to do is we're going to look at the Tesla stock. All right. And what you can see here is Tesla peaked early 20. It hit another peak and soft period around August of 20, and then a final peak, and it looks like it's really kind of starting a downtrend now. So I don't think it's got much near-term upside anyway. So the final peak was very early 21 this year. So now I want to bring us right over to the Google Trends tool. And oops, I've got Bitcoin here. So I'm actually going to take a moment and type in, and this is how you use it. You type in TSLA, and then because it's a stock, you want to hit, see this tool comes right up and we'll say, oh, do you want the NASDAQ symbol for Tesla? And yes, I do. So if we look back at that chart we were just looking at, you will see that there was a peak in early 20. So February 20, you remember on the chart, Tesla peaked and then fell. Guess what this number of searches were doing? Search inquiries right at the peak of this stock, Tesla, were very, very high. Now, 100 is the level of the most searches that's ever been done on the stock. So this is the ultimate peak in search inquiries occurred, and I'm going to try to get our little bubble lined up here. But it was actually the end of August, okay, of 20. Now you remember looking at the chart a minute ago, that was a peak. I mentioned it was August of 2020. Now, the most recent peak, which was the beginning of this year, there's December 20, so there's right at the beginning of this year, so at the end of February roughly, wasn't quite as high as the all-time search back in August of last year, but it was still another high level. You can see levels prior to that were lower. So we got a pretty good indication, and when we combine this with technical indicators, if you read my blog, you'll know that I did a scathing write-up on Tesla right in February of this year, saying I think it's peaking because it was way over its 200-day moving average, and the search inquiries were peaking again. Maybe not as high as they were last August, but they were high. So it's a very valuable tool that if I happened to own Tesla and I had seen that it was off of it was deviating off of its mean average search inquiries by a spike, I would probably be inclined to sell it if the technicals were overbought. And that was the exact case, which I did point out in my blog. Do a search on Tesla on the blog, and you'll find out that I did, in fact, recommend selling Tesla early in the year. Okay, so now let's look at Bitcoin, which is another one of my favorite whipping boys, and I've been pretty adamant that Bitcoin is pretty goofy. I think it's a sign of speculation in this market. So we're going to look at the history. So I want you to keep these dates in mind. You'll see late 2017, there was a peak in Bitcoin before it crashed and burned. Then we saw around the summer, July or so of 2019, crash and burn. And then the most recent peak in Bitcoin, early 2020, let's call it February. Okay, keep those dates in mind. Late 17, mid 19, early 2021. Okay, let's now look at the Google search. Now this is the Google Trends search. It's absolutely free. So let's type in Bitcoin. Okay, now you'll notice it comes up with lots of different things, Bitcoin currency, Bitcoin, the term. Let's just try Bitcoin, and it provides what we're after. Son of a gun, late 17, before that first initial pretty large crash and burn, that was the all-time high in search inquiries on Bitcoin, okay? And what happened? The stock went down a lot after that. I think if I recall, it was down by 2/3 of its value right after that. No more search inquiries when the stock was poorly performing. 2020, right around the middle, okay, there's the end of 19. We mentioned that was one of the other dates. Okay, sorry, I'm going to look. There's middle of 19, I should say. There was a small peak, so it wasn't so valuable there. But as we came into the beginning of this year, February of 21, I mentioned that was another peak point. So you saw that the inquiries on Bitcoin were very high early this year. So again, it didn't work so well in 2019, although there was a spike. But these two times definitely pointed out that the market was too high on Bitcoin. And again, I blogged on this because you have to combine this tool with technicals. But when you have a very overbought market, way over its 200-day moving average, and everybody and their brother is searching the term Bitcoin or Tesla or what have you, you have a potential for a major market meltdown. And that's exactly what happened in both late 17 and early 2021. We've seen corrections both times. Okay, so let's look at another example. Isn't this fun? We're going to look at inflation, because as we know, now value trend, if you follow my blog and the newsletters that we send out, we were really early on the game getting into the reflation stocks, okay? So when everybody loved the FANG stocks and Tesla and Bitcoin and solar stocks and EV and all that, we were literally selling the stuff and buying into oil, which everybody hated, and it was something like $40 a barrel. We were buying metals, we were buying, you know, any of the commodities that you might think of. And of course, that trade turned out to be very good because suddenly, you know, if if you read my blogs from last August, I was saying that there's a good chance for inflation coming. Sure enough, everybody's now talking about inflation. Value Trend is a contrarian firm. That's why I've written the book on contrarian thinking. We like to try to think outside of the herd. And right now the herd is talking about inflation. So I'm going to pick up one of the areas that we're actually still invested in, although we have been paring back. And that is, if you've been reading my blog, you'll know I've been paring back on materials. So we still have base metals. We still have oil and gas. We still have fertilizer stocks, but they're high, they're overbought. And you can see that on the iShares US materials sector. It's an ETF. This thing is out of control. It's gone fairly parabolic, okay? Now let's look at the word inflation, because that's suddenly on everybody's mind. It wasn't on everybody's mind when, sorry, I better learn how to spell. I-N-F-L-A-T-I-O-N. Now, I didn't type in reflation because that's kind of a big word, and not everybody knows what reflation is, but people do know what inflation is. So I choose to look up inflation, all right? Now, look what happened is that inflation hit its peak for after, this is 5 years worth of data, and nobody's been talking about inflation for 5 years, but suddenly everybody's talking about it this year. In fact, very, very recently, okay? Right around April. So you see it's falling a little bit to the inquiries, and that leads me to wonder if the sector is a little bit overbought, which is why we didn't sell all of our position, because we actually do still believe in the inflation trade, but we know that the stocks are a bit overbought. So Craig and I at Value Trend, we reduced, not eliminated, our positions in materials. And we moved into some boring stuff like staples and dividend paying stocks, and we even bought a utility. These are boring stocks that pay dividends, but we felt that our inflation trade that has literally doubled and tripled in some cases since our August purchases is a little overdone, okay? So you can see that the crowd got really excited about the idea of inflation, and it was not so excited when we were buying. Back in July, August, there's where we were buying. Nobody was talking about inflation back then, okay? So we're contrarians, this is what we do. So the last one, and I thought this would be kind of fun because this is very timely. Everybody's talking about the, the Robinhood investors, and they're on social media platforms, and they talk about which stock they're going to go after next that's been shorted. And AMC has been in the news. So son of a gun, AMC search inquiries are very high right now. In fact, they were high, if I get this thing to line up, around February. And they were hot. They've been right now. They're as of this date, they're very, very high. Okay, the dotted lines are showing that it's not the end of a week. They do it by the week. So what I'm showing you here is that AMC had absolutely no inquiries for 5 years, and suddenly everybody's all over AMC. And this lines up with the stock. So you can see that the stock's been the dog's breakfast, and then remember that first peak in inquiries, early 2021, January, February, you got a spike in the stock. It did fall. You saw the inquiries fell a bit. And now we're having another resurgent, as you just saw, in inquiries, and the stock is just parabolic, okay? What this tells me is that everybody and their brother is searching AMC because the thing's been on fire, and they're wondering when it'll end, when the game will end. It's not a good company, this company. It's a company, well, it's a good company, but it's not a very profitable, forward-looking business compared to some of the other stocks you might be wanting to look at right now. But it's got momentum. Buyers are not buying the stock for its wonderful fundamentals or its future growth prospects and its 10-year plan and all that stuff. They're buying it because they're trying to squeeze the shorts. So this will end, and when the inquiries on Google end, that I believe will be the end of the rally here. So I'm getting a picture when I look at those Google search trends that it's all over, everybody all over the world is searching AMC, want to trade it, and it's getting overdone because if you've ever heard the lesson about dumb money, it's when the dumbest investors bought, that's when the trade is over. So there's going to be a point where everybody's talking about it, and finally you get the dumbest person in the room buying the stock, and that's when the trade is over. All right, Greater Fool Theory, I believe it's called. I talk about that in my book. So that is it for today. We're going to wrap that up, and I hope you got a little bit of information on spotting overbought stocks. And as I said, it's just one of the tools that I talk about in my upcoming book. I'm really hoping the book, I should say, is released early July, and I'm very excited about it. I think it's probably the best book I've written out of the 3 books I've done and many blogs I've written. I really put my heart into it. I did an awful lot of research, and I've honestly talked about things that I think many books and investors are completely unaware of as tools that you can use to profitably invest in a contrarian manner. Thanks for watching, and we'll catch you next week.